So the topic of panel discussion is perspectives on harmony. So any of you can start.
So to define what is happiness and what is harmony, so when we ask the question, what is harmony and what is harmony? What is happiness? And is happiness more subjective or objective? I think happiness is more subjective. So to get a stable happiness, we have to train our mind and transform our mind. Through that, we can get a better and stable and permanent happiness. And harmony, to have a harmony, I think it is very important to have a mutual respect. And when you have a mutual respect, then we can have a more harmonious society. And harmony, to get a mutual respect, I think we need to know the fundamental sameness quality. We all the living beings, same. We want happiness and we don't want suffering. And more important than that, I think it is very important to remind that we all are related. We all are dependent on each other. And just this simple recognition, I think we can have a huge impact on our outlook. So through that, I think we can build better society and a better world and yes, thank you.
Tashi Delik. Well, I wish to share two instances from Indian philosophy. One is the story of two birds sitting on a fruit tree. And of these two birds, the one bird is busy eating and enjoying the fruits. And near to that, there's another bird just watching, not doing anything specifically. So here are the two birds, the one bird which is busy enjoying the fruits, and the other bird just watching. I think harmony would mean a healthy mix of engagement and detachment, to be completely in what we are doing, and while we are completely ourselves in what we are doing, experience a detachment. Another instance which I wish to share with you is from the text called Abhinaya Darpana, which is the text on Indian dance, stagecraft, and drama. There's a beautiful Sanskrit verse which goes like this. Yado drishtihi tado hastaha, yado hastaha tada manaha. Which means an ideal dancer, where her eyes is, there goes her hand, and where her hand goes, there goes her mind, which again indicates to be full and completely be with what you are doing. And I think harmony once again brings in the ability to be with whatever we are doing in a complete manner and recognize that as the source of happiness.
In my perspective as a clinical psychologist and neuroscientist, and also in my perspective as a human, I too see harmony as a dance and also a negotiation. Humans and all animals on this planet are governed by motivations, the motivation for reward and the motivation for protection. And every situation in our life is marked by cues for reward and protection. And the harmony is striking the balance of making behavioral actions that are that demonstrate awareness of the potential for reward and the potential for danger or risk to oneself. And the way that we find this balance is to cultivate a quality of mind which allows us to find clarity for these cues in the environment. Many of the people who are suffering from emotional disorders, the people who I treat in my clinical trials and who are in the clinics where I train tomorrow's clinicians, have a quality of mind that obscures them from these cues for reward and danger in their lives. And they tend to privilege the potential for danger, and they become blind or obscured from the possibility of reward. So for me, harmony is helping individuals through practice find a quality of mind that allows them to clearly see these cues in their lives and to take actions from these basic motivational pulls from within.
I think it's somewhat similar. I'm reminded of a Zen story where a student is learning martial arts and struggling to perform, and then the teacher takes the student to a river and shows the river and see how the water flows. And there are lots of rocks, and it doesn't get frustrated. It finds cracks, or it flows by the side of the rocks really fairly effortlessly, and tells the student that that is harmony. And there is a concept in psychology which could be of some relevance. It's called flow. It's introduced by a person called Mike Csikszentmihalyi. And there is some recent research to show that people who have higher emotional intelligence actually have a higher probability of experiencing flow. And two concepts which I think are very important for flow are control, that you have to be in control of whatever that you are doing, and sometimes people also use the term effortless attention. Thank you.
A famous physicist, Feynman, once said that atoms were small particles that attracted when a little far apart and repelled when close together. And that's a recipe for balance. If you have two hydrogen atoms, they attract until they come together to a certain distance when the repulsion balances the attraction, and they make a molecule. Going the next step, inside those hydrogen atoms, there are protons. And George Gamow was a physicist who was thinking about those protons, and they repel each other by electrostatics. Inside the sun, the gravity and pressure and temperature drives those protons together until they eventually become helium and energy. So George Gamow reported he had great happiness one night when he realized he was the only person on Earth who knew why the sun shone and that it was going to continue to shine for billions of years. Soon, he acted as a teacher and shared that knowledge with all of us so we can all be happy to look up at the sun and know it's going to continue to shine. However, continuing the story, my professor at MIT, A.P. French, was at a laboratory in the 1940s, and he was asked to bring the power of the sun to Earth. And during the day, he took two isotopes of hydrogen and collided them. And he said when he went to bed that night, he knew that the power of nuclear fusion could be brought to Earth. Now it turns out that power can be used in different ways. We can use that power of combining those protons and releasing the energy to power the Earth and make many people happy. But it hasn't been used that way yet. So far, the only way it's been used is to create the hydrogen bomb. And this is why scientists need to talk to people who are not scientists, to people who are philosophers, to help the world achieve the understanding and the balance where the use of this nuclear fusion is for everybody's happiness and not for the release of terrible, damaging punishment.
Harmony, in a sense, when we talk about cosmos, and especially from astronomy and astrophysics point of view. In a simpler format, I think it is fundamental cause and root which generates happiness. In our cosmos, there is a harmony, and science is trying to explore, and science is exploring how it exists since 100 years back, from Carl Sagan times. In our own solar system, planetary system, there is harmony, synchronization. That's why it's functioning smoothly. I think what I believe it is a state where we feel comfortness. We feel synchronized to each other. And if we are synchronized to each other, that really generate happiness and that fraternity in that group. I think that is the balanced state. If we are deviating by any means of noise or any disturbance, that may destroy our harmonious state. So meaning achieving harmony in our system, maybe in human life, maybe in our group, maybe in nature, which is already there, ultimate aim through this philosophical, very important line in Indian philosophy, there is no adi, there is no end. That means there is no start, there is no end. Everything is already in this cosmos. So we have to understand. That is all about, from my point of view.
I'm a cognitive scientist, and actually in my field we never really talk about harmony and happiness. We just talk about the mechanisms of attention and memory. But actually, if you think about it, it's quite evident that a lot of what we're doing is also about harmony and happiness. Because if you cannot control your mind, if you cannot control your attention, then before you know it, you are swept away by anger, desire, and all of those negative emotions. So my work is in a way motivated by this desire to better understand how the mind works, so that we can learn how to use it more effectively. And from my own experience as a Buddhist practitioner, I know that meditation helps, and Western cognitive science could potentially help us to understand a bit more about why it works in the way it does and what it does exactly. And then hopefully by bringing those two worlds of Buddhist psychology and Western psychology together, we can bring more happiness to a larger group of people. The people in the West that might not be so motivated to develop compassion in the first place might be motivated to improve their attention, but then at the same time, when they get better understanding of their own minds, they themselves will become happier as well, even though that's not their prime motive.
I think harmony and happiness are interrelated, and with harmony you get happiness. And when we talk about, and actually my perspective, my approach would be strictly from the Buddhist point of view. And when I say with harmony you get happiness, we tend to think that harmony comes from, when we talk about harmony, there is harmony within as well as harmony without. And most of the time we tend to think from our habitual upbringing that harmony is something out there. And I would like to quote one great Buddhist master by the name of Shantideva. In Tibetan it says, "Sadin dida koyoto tinye kowe kalalang, lamdi zamgi kowe ni sadin tamje yodata." So to avoid your feet from getting dirty, if you want to cover the whole world with leather or hide, it is not possible. But if you cover your feet with the hide, then the problem is solved. So I think harmony, the answer is there. It's from within.
In my work in clinical psychology, on a daily basis, when I do therapy with patients, people that come to me with who are suffering from various conditions. I meet these people for the first time, and my job is to establish some harmony with them. And oftentimes, it's difficult. You need to sort of find a common ground, find ways of relating to a person that you've never met before, who's experiencing something you've never experienced. And the ability to establish harmony with someone, we often call the Therapeutic Alliance. And it's one of the most powerful predictors of success in psychological interventions. And I think it requires both kinds of harmony, from within and without. So being able to recognize, your own reactions to the client or to the patient that you're seeing, and also recognize, the energy in the room to establish harmony.
When I think about happiness and its relationship to harmony, I think of two different key ways that people engage in the world. And one of them is a very lower level, sort of reflexive or instinctive or habitual way of engaging with oneself and other people in the world around them. And the other is a very intentional and deliberate and purposeful way of engaging with oneself and people around you. And harmony, I think, is discovering the strategies or the techniques or the wisdom to use these different modes of being in different situations that you find yourself in. It's a little bit like how we think of harmony in music. We have different instruments playing different parts together, and some are easy and some are more difficult. And only when they're all working in a harmonious way does it sound nice. So I believe that the reason that Western health professionals and mental health professionals can learn something from the Buddhist traditions or the contemplative traditions is that we might be able to discover more about how a person can train their own musical conductors in their mental life to use the tools that they have in a more strategic and adaptive way, a flexible and adaptive way.
It's a great perspectives on harmony. I would say, to add to that, I would say harmony is a balance between both internal and external experiences, as well as within different internal experiences. As a clinical psychologist as well, I work with patients who suffer from all sorts of different things. And most of them, I would say, have fallen out of harmony. And I think it's our job as clinical psychologists to kind of help bring them back to balance. So for people who have experienced post-traumatic stress, as an example, I would say often are disharmonious and focused primarily internally without really acknowledging the change in external environment. So I think it's our job as clinicians in a lot of ways to bring that balance and harmony back to our patients.
All the participants, we are in harmony. Why? Because our body is in harmony. Our heart is beating 72 per minute. Our lungs have been taking respiration 15-20 times per minute. Our intestine is digesting harmoniously everything which we have just had. Liver is metabolizing all those things. That's why we are in harmony. If everybody functions, do their function properly, we are in harmony. This is body harmony. Now come to the head. We always think of in the brain there is only mind. But the 4-5 things are working on the brain. Brain is the playground of mind, self, life, and consciousness. Consciousness is that which looks after what is happening in our mind, self, and life. And by which? Information. All this information which is coming from the body, information coming from outside, all these things should be in harmony. Information is the spoiler. If you get a bad information, everything, harmony is disturbed. If you get a correct information, your harmony is restored. body, mind. Now come to the cosmos. We are in the planet Earth, in the star sun. Wade through the interstellar space, intergalactic space, and the inter-universal space, from where the multiple universes are born. Now, that essence, if we are in communion with that essence, we are in harmony with myself, with others, and with the universe. Thank you.
Digi into Zamba, Penanga, Nangbe, Tadukungune, Pezunch, Tungushuna Chanson, Tikaras Shuina, Anganzu Tatumnalia, Chengju to Semki to Zange, Junja Menga, Dugone, Semki to Chita, Tashinyam Jigone, Semki to Ni, Sonyare, Chesa Junja Menga Dugone, Shanju to Semki to Ti, and the 20 Danjawak and the Chel to Shuina, Junja Menga Dunala. Semje Tamje Marisha but change but chinso or young champa ninja hassams. Dinde Pangrim Sung Yungare. Chazan Semje Tamje Marisha but Sundu Zange and Jidin Kamge Semje Tamje Soso Pama. Re Dishin but Chigure Sunguya Mare. Chazan Semje Koala Toma Tamata Toma Medu Zange Semje Tamje Rangi Tinjing Ma Shima Yung and Medu and Semje Tamje Gikajin Di. Tante Kibe, Soso Pama di Katinta, Ani Chixongi, Tindeji, Chembe Tone, Ani Katin Chenguya Chitan, Chembe, Zangamase, Ani Katin Chamber Chen Sotwa, Ankatinle, Samshi Chiguati, Negazoji, Dun Zamba, Ani Chikatin Chenya Chitan, Tagna Shiki Tashin, Nyamji Kone, Ani Tinigi, Pezun di, Ani Tunji Seati. Ani chotu yuwaji yungu dus shuwa chikse dini di yakuji chungba ina ani digi sayati korang shingi chubi yuwa chilaya ngaranga ngune ngunzu shugu je shuwa yin tojan.
Let me translate this briefly. The Venerable Geshe was saying that in the Buddhist practice there is a practice called cultivating the mind to enlightenment, which can be done through two processes. One is through the cause-effect relationship. You cultivate the needed causes, and then the effect will be the cultivation of this altruistic mind to enlightenment. The second practice is called exchanging the self for others. Both of these two practices of cultivation of bodhicitta are based on the realization that all sentient beings are your mothers, in the sense, not in the sense that they are your mothers right now, but in the sense that they have acted to your mother for countless lives in the beginning. And once you are able to develop this awareness and recognition, then naturally you will be able to remember their kindness. And that leads to the second development of how to repay their kindness. So it is through this process of cultivation of recognizing all sentient beings as something very dear and close to your heart that naturally this will develop the greatest harmony. And from that, naturally, you will get that long-lasting peace and happiness.
The Tindidani, the Chikakorle, and Kalasomure. Tosinigala, Tindidan, the Chilsiva Digia, near Marontochi, Nawagi, and in Dichondiliani. Then Tindidan, the Chisivagi, Yonyagi, and the Jichinjano. Sogo Yore. Ni Tujin and Tunjidan, the Chisera, the Jichinte, and the Jichintical Dashan Tang Yonjita, and the Jimrita. Taman only ni Chonsani Shayona, Gardana, ni Giwachas, Giwacha, ni Garsa, and Lichilin Namas, Panamaja, Jinamba, some Chintosini. Ani masage tachi kanza pawatuzogi ya ani nomasanji to ani ditang dani ya ani komba ni tomo pichi ni tin yare yare ba chini ni ani karsa li jimri sa ti tang yara komba ani niwat pogo yore tani komba sambati ko jo warzena shamtang nyangji tani takachi bo simchil to si ramba chini yongo yore. Tang Azoni Chu 아니 마몽 소마를 야네 지 냠슬린 토야 때 거잖아 아니 저머니 니 단 머기 셔뽕니 다치니 링거 아니 일 도졸라니 티 짐바니 때야니 도코 잡치니 아니 ngakeni michilani kadi no pachingdoye ane lichi ni michila no pa kari chigdoye ane semgu goni michilani no sum kari chigdoye na titani ani tape kombaje yongore ni titani kombaje yongni gala da soso ni soso te soso gni simde ya te soso simde twaina ni me parola ni no pa chigmares no pa machina 다른 신경이 던져서 대용 거 요래 네 대치서 대용 거 요래 네 따티 이지니 따티 지 로스지 네 잔삼다 네 지 토산이 야급 더니 지 더니 말하요나 소디다 소디 공조다 가조지니 아니 잔삼 경정경은 저 다이나 다 뒤를 니치기는 아니 뒤를 니시는 아니 간디 용도아 아니 다 디름 되나요? 디지 니가 뭐야 말도 대산이 영화 좀 요만 도지니가 땅이네 지 셔야되니 디지 말도 좀에 대 주타저 안슬레 대치가메다 호티건라지 네 넘버 속에 손대에 공도 되는거라 네 디지가 듣지나
Because I am not conversant in English, I was not following what was happening. So what I'm saying may be erratic and out of the context, but with this title, Harmony and Happiness, what I would like to say is that anything that is conditioned has to come from its respective causes and conditions. So similarly, in the case of harmony and happiness, also it has to come from its causes and conditions. And therefore, if we want to cultivate harmony and happiness, we need to first of all search for the right causes and conditions of harmony and happiness. So in this context, one will find that the most important kind of formula is, one, to refrain from harming others, physically, verbally, and mentally. And secondly, it is not enough simply not to harm others, but on top of that, you need to extend that mind of altruism, where you're able to see all sentient beings like yourself wanting happiness and not suffering, but still full of suffering. And with this recognition, you develop this loving kindness, compassion, or bodhicitta and altruism. So it is through this kind of process that you will be able to put an end to unnecessary conflict and aggression or violence. And once you are able to do away with this negative activities like aggression, violence, and so forth, the outcome naturally will be harmony and happiness.
I thought Emiliana's way of explaining harmony was interesting, distinguishing between habitual and intentional engagement. I was actually thinking, won't it be a difficult task for any engagement, the intensity in any engagement to be differentiated, thinking that this is habitual and perhaps this is something which is much more serious? Shouldn't intensity be the same, whether it is daily routine or some remarkable things which we do?
I thought of these as more automatic or inherent within us, and the degree to which we have access to these pulls within us may be enhanced by a deliberate process of training the mind so that we can see these cues. So I appreciate what she said.
To follow on your point, I think it is important to recognize that the habits and reflexes that we carry aren't permanent or unchangeable. And it's very possible that through practice or training, we can shift perhaps a habit towards aggression or violence into a different kind of habit, so that when we encounter something that that disrupts our goals or impedes our desire to approach something. Instead of thinking of aggression and violence, we can think of a cooperative solution or another way to solve the problem. And that's possible through some of the training exercises that I think the Buddhist traditions can offer.
So to follow up on my own points and in relation to what's been said, we've been talking about training the mind as a way to potentially increase happiness. I think actually this meeting is quite remarkable and important in that it brings the scientific study of maybe, training the mind and developing, cultivating different capacities of attention together with the bigger questions about what it means to be human and what it means to be kind and compassionate. And if we only focus on training the mind and training our attention, then there is always the danger that, we train our attention to become a perfect sharpshooter or something like that. So I very much appreciate the importance of coming back to our motivation and our intention.
I really liked what you said about the birds, the metaphor of the birds. And I think this relationship this balance between engagement and detachment is something I think a lot about in my research and also in my clinical work, right? So, how do we instruct our patients as to when they should be engaging and when they should be detaching? Oftentimes, I think it's very hard to teach that balance, and it's something I struggle with, even to understand sometimes in my own experience.
Well, thank you. I think we can have a longer discussion later, but I'll put it very short now. I think detachment may not be possible in a forced manner, right? You engage for 10 minutes you detach. I don't think that's possible. So the only way to detach is observe while you're engaged, because observation brings in detachment.
I'd like to emphasize something that Saket mentioned, which was looking for the harmony of the planets, and the essence of science as looking for laws that allow us to predict if A happens, then B will follow, this causality. And the search for that harmony in nature, that harmony that may be there for us to discover, or when we do discover it, what do we do with it? So keep in mind that there are harmonies we're searching for, and we sometimes find them, and sometimes we don't.
But there is a very famous quote by Carl Sagan, the well-known astronomer and science communicator. Humans are intentionally searching harmony in the nature. It may be, or it may not be available everywhere. So that is the search or exploration which scientists are trying to understand.
Mahatma Gandhi said, there is enough for everybody's need, but not enough for everybody's greed. So it is this kind of negative emotions like greed which is destroying us, which is splitting us into parts. It may not be surprising to note that, at least from my perspective, human beings are the most mischievous animal in this world. We are overly clever or intelligent, so much so that we are trying to control nature, which is an impossible task. Some of the presenters very succinctly and pointed out the need to learn how to flow with the flow, with the changing situation. And that was actually what the Buddha was talking about when he was talking about impermanence, when he was talking about suffering, when he was talking about interdependent origination. He's simply talking about the law of nature. Suffering is not made by Buddha, impermanence is not made by Buddha. Interdependent origination is not made by Buddha. They are the way things are. So therefore the Buddha was saying that open your eye and see the reality and try to adjust your way of life in accordance with the reality, which we are not doing, and that's why we are today suffocating ourselves, killing ourselves. This morning I was watching, very early morning, I get up around 4. So this morning I was watching a documentary from BBC, and where some of the experts very clearly said that if we don't do something with this carbon emission, we'll very soon reach a stage from where we cannot return back. So number one is that science gives us the knowledge, but majority of the people unfortunately are not informed of these latest scientific findings and knowledges. What they get is technology, another tool to get completely confused and lost. So people are simply fiddling with the gadgets, and these gadgets sometimes to me looks like junks. The world is filled up with junks of all kinds, with very interesting names and nice looking shapes and models, which keeps on updating all the time. And I tell people that we are quite efficient in updating what is outside of us, not necessarily to do good for others, but to sell. But what about updating oneself? We never update oneself, so we remain the same stubborn person, never changing. So number one, we don't get enough knowledge of the latest dangerous, risky situations of the world. Number two, those of us who have the knowledge, we don't practice. So who is going to practice to bring about this change? So that's a very, very challenging task. But in Buddhism we say that everybody has Buddha nature, so let us not completely give up hope. So what we really need is that through this kind of dialogue and discussion, we need to tell in unequivocal terms that there is no shortcut solution for these major problems. As we say in Buddhism, there is no push-button enlightenment, no shortcut to enlightenment. So we need to, number one, realize the reality, the dangerous situation in which we are living today. Then accordingly, before it is too late, each of us need to take steps which would stop us moving towards committing this global suicide, as I said this morning. If we simply let the negative emotions run wild as we are doing and follow this lifestyle of consuming everything at the cost of destroying everything, then unfortunately it will not be far enough, far away, so that we will all reach a stage where we'll all just simply stare each other's face and will not be able to solve the problem. So therefore, what the eminent panelists have shared, I expect all of you to not only get these knowledges as a kind of information, because much of the information we get these days is junk information, which is not needed. But unlike those junk information, the information that you got today is very important information. So let us turn and transform this information into knowledge, a knowledge which would color our emotion, activate us, get up, go and do things to make this world a better place to live in. So with this, I stop the panelist discussion. Thank you very much.